Hey everyone, welcome back. I've got a very interesting video for you today. This one comes courtesy of Gifts, a good friend of mine from Streams and Mutuals. He is also the one who lent me the Titania fashion for my Dewata Steel Path video, if you remember that. Today we're going to be looking at an exercise in theory crafting. It's a very clear and distinct example, so I think it should work. Glaxion Vandal is a decent weapon, however it has always been held back by being pure cold. This made it very difficult to build around because it isn't really a crit viable weapon. You can go Avenger and then building viral hunting munitions, but it was rather painful to do so and felt brute forcing. Also, you only had a 30% crit conversion to slash and it wasn't even 100% crit. Contrast this to Ignis Wraith, which can be both built for viral heat hunter munitions, or even corrosive heat. In all cases, you can get adequate amounts of heat weighting by minimizing the viral mods, or rely on the crit slash since Ignis is crit viable, or just go all in on corrosive weight and heat being just token CC and bonus armor reduction. But building viral heat on Glaxion requires 3 mods, and no matter what you do, the viral weight is too high compared to heat. This is bad because beam weapons have 0 issues proccing status as a high fire rate weapon with long sustained DPS due to large magazine. This means most of the status procs are wasted, since every viral proc after the 10th is useless. This could be much better purpose to creating more heat procs instead. Additionally, using 3 mods means you have 1 less open slot than, say, Ignis, which only needs 2 mods to make viral heats. It's actually an issue because Glaxion is a very slot-starved weapon. If you look at this build, there isn't really any open slots to fit on a primed Bane, and that's a massive DPS loss. Primed Shred is essential because it turns any single target weapon like those beams into multi-target. Maybe not AoE, but you can shoot this into a group and it will go out the back. 2.2 meters punch through is enough to hit 4 humanoid enemies, or 3 quadrupeds. Unless you're running some 280 range massive grouping setup, 2.2 meter punch through is enough to hit the entire crowd you shoot into. So how would you patch this up? Well, normally people would suggest running Roar to make up for the missing primed Bane. This way you can still double dip the heat dots created from Glaxion. And this is where today's video begins. While Roar does solve the missing Bane issue, it does not fix the underlying problem with Glaxion. Too much viral, not enough heat. Thermal Sunder's Augment is the other side to the same coin as Roar. Both offer you a solution to save slots. Either skip the Bane and use Roar, or skip the heat mod and use thermal transfer. But while they lead to the same final build concepts, their effectiveness is very different in practice. Thermal transfer solves the biggest problem Glaxion has: too much viral. By decoupling the reliance on heat from mods, just like Roar does for Banes, you can run as high or low heat weight as you want. By using Warframe strength stats, this lets you run a high strength build to make sure heat is the highest weight again. Not only will this obviously improve the heat dot damage numbers, but it will also massively improve the amount of heat procs you create instead of viral. And as a beam weapon, you will still max out 10 viral stacks quickly. And now that slot once filled by Hellfire is now filled with a primed Bane instead. The rest of the Gauss build is pretty standard. Rolling guard for shield gate iframes to cast your abilities and reset shields. Vigilante Pursuit to see where enemy spawns are densest, while also providing a Vigilante set bonus to Glaxion since we aren't bringing a primary weapon on our Sentinel to work as a Vigilante stat stick. Combat Discipline will self-damage you through Kinetic Plating to proc Arcane Avenger, which will boost your Glaxion's crit chance by a flat 45%, and Energize to deal with the 45 efficiency. Because of how long your 2, 3, and Redline lasts at 172 duration, you don't need to worry about Equilibrium or Zenric for energizing dash too much. In theory, you can put Roar on this build for even more DPS, but since the only way to easily build up your red line is your 1, as Thermal Sunder's cold version increases it, but we don't want to give ourselves a cold buff, you have to put Roar over as 2, which means you lose the prime sure-footed and built-in Hunter's Adrenaline effect. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you need maximum DPS, such as against Demolysts. Now, the next question. Since Roar and Thermal Sunder are both helmet abilities, they are not mutually exclusive. Would it be more effective to run Roar on Gauss or Thermal Sunder on RHINO? To figure this out, first we need to point out Thermal Sunder is the same on both Gauss and RHINO, but Roar is nerfed when subsumed to other frames. It is only 60% effective as normal, or in other words, Roar is 1.67 times more effective on RHINO than other frames. You may think this is where things end, but it isn't. Gauss has another buff up his sleeve, Redline. Now we need to compare how much Redline brings to the table. We already have Prime Shred on the weapon, so our effective fire rate is 155%. Redline adds another 129%. This is a 1.83 damage increase, which is even more than the RHORA advantage RHINO has. Yes, you only spend 2/3 of the time at max Redline, but you also need to consider Gauss's kit has some stagger particles from Redline and built-in prime sure-footed on its kinetic plating that still lets you self-damage for Arcane Avenger, which is something Iron Skin does not let you do. Personally, I feel this is enough to put Gauss ahead of RHINO, and this is before we've even considered how Gauss will actually produce more heat procs than RHINO, independent of the actual damage of said heat procs. So this was the build I settled on for Glaxion Vandal on Gauss. I still have to spend 2 mod slots to make viral, because if I don't and I use thermal transfer, the heat will combine with a single toxin mod before the innate cold and make gas cold instead. I also kept both of these rank 0 since the weapon is already 100% cold weighting innately. With these, it now has 130% viral, so I need more than 130% heat onto the weapon to make the heat the main element. That is the rough breakpoint to be considered viable. Since thermal transfer scales off strength, this is easy. Prime Shred for the reason I mentioned earlier to turn into multi-target weapon while also giving fire rates, the crit mods that we're stacking with Arcane Avenger to get to 87% crit chance, which is enough to be consistent on a beam weapon as it is sustained in DPS and not single shot coin flip RNG like, say a 87% crit chance Chacker. Galvanized Aptitude since we will be instantly inflicting viral and heat, which means 160% base damage from the mod already, equal to Serration. But it also gives us 80% status, which is really important, as the 60/60 mods are all unranked. This massively increases the amount of heat procs we deal. And finally, we can slot the Primed Bane since we were missing on the RHINO Bane to double dip heat dots for 2.4 times more damage. Primary Merciless since it's a Gauss build, and some extra reload to cut it down to 1.4 seconds, and Vigilante Supplies to deal with the increased fire rate and ammo economy drain. If you really want to, you can bring a Heat Inherent Epitaph AoE primer to go with this Glaxion, and it would look like this. It's unnecessary, but would more than double your heat DPS. You'll notice that there are no Augur mods on this Epitaph. If you don't bring Augur mods on your pistol, then you can bring a Burst Laser Sentinel weapon as an Augur stat stick, since it is the only pistol weapon Sentinels have. Otherwise, you can just carry a normal Epitaph primer build that has 2 Augur mods. And the melee is irrelevant, so you can bring whatever you want. And there you go. This is how you turn Glaxion into a weapon of mass destruction and finally do it justice. Thermal Sunder finally gets the spotlight in one of my videos with a practical example on what it can do for heat weighting. Have fun! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible. Like I've done with covering the new augments and these meme builds. Stick around if you enjoy seeing interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.